Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi everyone. Today's episode is Mass Exodus in the Accounting Profession. Our guest today is Dan Fletcher, CFO at Planful. On this episode, we discuss why accountants are leaving the profession, whether accounting needs a rebrand, and some possible solutions to stop the mass exodus. Now, I'll hand it over to our host, Gapify CEO Jotham Tai.
Dan, how's it going? Welcome to the Accounting Live podcast. So glad to have you on.
I'm glad to be here, Jotham. This is long overdue, so thank you for the invitation.
I can't wait. And I can't believe also that we've taken this long. I will blame my marketing team for that. Must be some miscommunication on the side. But nonetheless, glad to have you on and also to talk about a very important topic in our profession. And, you know, at this point, it's getting pretty good coverage and for good reason. And I'm a big proponent of, making sure that this issue gets the mic time that it needs because it's such a critical issue for the profession. And of course, what I'm talking about here is the mass exodus in the accounting profession. I think there are a lot of webinars now and white papers and all sorts of blogs and write-ups about how we can change that. And a lot of it points to automation, obviously, and that's why I'm excited about what we do at Gapify. It's one way to improve the state of the profession. There's also more like, how we incorporate changes into the schooling systems. But Dan, because you and I are, both very effective CPAs, very logical, but I think we also kind of have like a creative, we have creative superpowers that is sometimes underestimated. So for today's podcast episode, I wanted to target some questions more on the fun, intangible, call it squishy side of the equation. So I hope you're ready for a different take on this conversation.
I am more than ready. And as you know, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. I've described it as the demise of the corporate CPA in some public forums. And so I'm absolutely concerned, aware of it, and am eager to get creative, like you said.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to hit you hard with this first question. And this was a very fascinating idea I recently heard from a partner at an accounting firm. And she had suggested that the term accountant itself at this point has gotten, such the stereotype of just like doing mundane, mechanical, and boring work. Obviously you picture accountants and historically what we've done, we're in our cubes, just crunching away, staring at our cubicle plant. Has that term accountant run its course? And do we need to, as a profession, figure out a new label for our profession? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
That is an interesting question. And it's not one that I've ever been asked. So I think it's very out of the box and very creative in the theme of the podcast today. I think my initial reaction to that is it's a complex answer. What I will acknowledge is that a rebrand as a concept is not a bad one. I mean, I think, you think about Taylor Swift, it feels like she rebrands herself every phase of her career from country to pop to folk, and she is a megastar and clearly has success rebranding. So I will acknowledge that some rebrands go well, others mileage may vary, like Facebook and Meta, et cetera. And so I think it's in the nuance, right? And so what I would say about accounting is I acknowledge what that Big Four partner said, that it's got a stigma, especially vis-a-vis FP&A, that's considered to be less sexy, if you will, or less attractive as a path to CFO. But I think on its face, like if the job is focused on the accounting of the business, I don't have a problem calling it accounting. I think we need to change the conversation around that. But if you're a general ledger accountant, often this is at more entry-level jobs. And if you're a CPA, wear it proudly. And the organization, the industry just needs to have some pride in itself and not let it be defined by those stigmas because they're not true. I started as a CPA. I'm a CFO. You started as a CPA. You're a founder of a high-flying tech company. So there's some inaccuracies and stigmas there. But on the other side of that coin, I do think that a lot of the roles, probably the vast majority of people on accounting teams, are not always, or not even majority, focused on bookkeeping. These are the people who are in financial operations. They're doing AR, they're doing AP, they're doing treasury, they're doing tax. They're being strategic about how to design contracts and helping the deal desk. And I think there is an opportunity to change the labeling around those jobs. And so that's my riffing on the question.
Well, I want to recognize two very important points there and just to repeat it back because I think they're so critical. Number one, Taylor Swift, you had it there. That explains everything. The evolution of Taylor Swift. And if we accountants follow that trend or that evolution ourselves, we can end up at a better place. But you also brought up, on a serious note, the idea that the accounting profession itself is so broad, right? So there's operational, there's bookkeeping, there's tax. Maybe it is time to bifurcate and maybe update the accountant profession to be more specific about the areas where there is like a lot of excitement. So, of course, like I'm referring to, with my background, more on the enterprise accounting, corporate accounting, or whatever you want to call it. And that could even mean like AP, AR versus, GL, which is more strategic and technical. So maybe we just have to like append terms to accountant to make it more known that we do something more than just bookkeeping, and not to say that bookkeeping is any less superior than other forms of accounting, but I think that level of clarification can maybe help, to your point, like have accountants defend their domain. And if you say I'm a technical accountant, I think as far as like changing the branding, like we accountants have to say, hey, technical accounting, this is not boring. Like we go through a lot of technical stuff and review contracts and rules. I have to be updated with business environments and the way businesses operate, because that matters when determining the right guidance to apply. So maybe there's something there, Dan, where we do have to just maybe not completely rebrand and come up with a new name entirely, but be maybe more specific. I don't know. I'm just riffing here. Any thoughts on that?
No, I like it. I think so. You upload these on YouTube.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. So I'm going to be like an influencer. This we should crowdsource, and the audience needs to smash the like button and drop their rebranding in the comments. And I'll start with mine. I think we should have a conversation. We have FP&A, financial planning and analysis. We have sales operations. We need financial operations. And that accurately describes all of the operations around finance, accounting, treasury, tax, bookkeeping, AR, AP, expense management, procurement, et cetera. So my stab at this, I'll go out first. I think it should be financial operations or FinOps. So that's just one. And that's probably not a new idea. There's probably businesses out there that already call it that, but that's
unfortunately fine. The FinOps is being grabbed by the FP&A team and like more on the strat side of the CFO org, right? Like I think FP&A has already made claim to that domain there. And on the GL side, like, and the controllership side, I think that's where we need something more sexy. And I guess let's brainstorm for a bit. Like, let's just spitball some ideas. Like, I think I've brought up financial engineer before. Although, I mean, that implies that you're understanding the engineering and the mechanics of your business transactions and how to account for it. But I don't know, that might sound too technical. And what are some other like alternative titles within the controllership that would make it more attractive?
Well, so financial engineering is very buzzy, but I worry that engineering implies creativity, implies
you're entering on P&L.
We need to be somewhat careful about the versions of creativity we deploy on the accounting side of the house. That's for sure. Oh boy. I mean, so let's throw out some buzzwords. What's happening on that side of the business? To me, it's execution of financial transactions. It's accounting for them. It's
it's learning how to
some
account for business
strategy.
activity, right? Ultimately, we're recording business activity, and we have to do it based on widely accepted rules and guidelines, i.e. US GAAP, IFRS, and so on. So
Let's
rule
come back
applier.
to it.
No, that I'm going the wrong way now. Rule applier is not good.
Let's come back to it. I'll have that script running, that little query running in my head. And meanwhile, you should go to ChatGPT and ask it for a rebrand, and then we can share it at the end.
I may have a tab already open for ChatGPT. That's a whole nother episode all in itself. But yeah, let's park that for now, Dan. And I do want to touch on something that we already touched on, which is FP&A. I mean, let's face it, they get all the glam when it comes to like the fun work that comes with finance, right? So because it's like forward looking, you do get to collaborate with business partners and get an excuse to talk to marketing to find out what they're doing, versus us in accounting and the controllership or bugging them for data at month end. I mean, I think by the function of the role itself, the controllership isn't thought of as sexy as FP&A. First of all, do you agree with that? And if you do, like, how can we change the branding so that controllership doesn't look like the nagging party every month that business partners have to work with?
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I ran a LinkedIn poll asking what's the most clear path to CFO, and FP&A, corporate finance was 48%, and tied for second was 22% corporate accounting, tied with investment banking. And so that tells you all you need to know about the public perception of the path to CFO and how that relates to corporate accounting, which is, it's not number one, and it's in fact less than half as likely as FP&A. And I think what's happened, Jotham, is much of the work in FP&A was already outside the box, free form, ad hoc, and it's very hard to automate that. My company, where I'm CFO, Planful, does as good as anybody at providing the workflows, but a bunch of that is also still human judgment, et cetera. Whereas in accounting, there's still a bunch of mundane manual tasks, and I'm totally teeing you up as Gapify CEO for this, but we at Planful do accounting automation as well in our consolidation and reporting. And to me, it until we free the accounting side of the house from a ton of these rote manual tasks during month-end close and out of month-end close, like booking accruals, dunning on accounts receivable, processing POs, all of these manual steps, until we truly free the career path up from that stuff, that career path will never have time to do the strategic work, to take on the strategic work that FP&A does as a core part of their job. So to me, it's step one, get rid of the manual stuff. Step two, make a land grab from FP&A and elsewhere in the org. There's no shortage. And let me just say, it's not a zero-sum game. FP&A would be glad to have the help, right? There's never enough bandwidth on analytical and strategic minds in the business. And truly, accountants, and people around accounting, they have a brain for numbers, and they are ripe to be slotted in as the farm system to more analytical work. And so step one, automate the manual labor. Step two, use that free time and fill it with more strategic, more path to CFO workflows. And then I think you've already accomplished 90% of what needs to happen. The other 10%, as we already talked about, is probably perception.
Well, you're not going to get any arguments here about automating it and its importance to helping the profession evolve. And I also want to make a serious point on top of that. When we think about strategic in the CFO office, we think of it as like analytics, right? But there's something strategic about accounting and financial reporting as well that it doesn't get talked about enough. And I recently talked about this at a webinar, actually, specific to our product with accruals, right? There is a strategic aspect to accruals. So instead of spending time just whipping up a spreadsheet, doing estimates or sending emails, if that's being automated, which our product does, the strategic part of accruals is determining for certain classes of vendors what kind of accruals work best. Is it confirmations? Is it calculation? How can you calibrate to get the fastest close? There is something strategic to kind of engineering your accruals process if you have the time to do it. And the reality is, without automation solutions like ours, people don't have that time. So, it definitely fits that point. And so I also wanted to recognize that, yes, I agree. If we accountants can do more analytics and trend analysis on P&L spend by vendor, we can support FP&A. They'd love that. But in addition to that, there's something strategic too in accounting operations that I think people will see that there's a lot of if they can get their heads out of the sand. So wanted to just add that there because I think it's part of the problem, the lack of recognition of what strategic work exists in accounting beyond just trend analysis, I think is important. I do think there's another important part to this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as a CFO, Dan. I mean, I do think that there's a good number of CFOs, at least the ones that I've been around, where you kind of just expect accountants to do everything right? Like if they don't screw up, that's best for us in accounting. So I think there's love that CFOs can express in a more open way. And of course, I don't know what kind of initiatives it'll take to get everyone there. But do you think if there is an opportunity for CFOs to express appreciation in different ways, with the controllership, could that also help with the mass exodus that we're seeing?
Well, I think the number one way you show appreciation is your time. It's your biggest asset. And many of the businesses I've worked with, and I have at times myself earlier in my CFO career, been guilty of doing exactly what you said. You just want accounting to run, and you're going to over-index on the strategic parts of FP&A and leave accounting to do their thing. And you only poke your head up when something goes haywire or the close is delayed or an invoice gets missed, et cetera. And that's 100% a path to disaster. And I think we've seen it in increased misstatements, in big high profile collapses like FTX. CFO is your job. If you don't get the accounting right, you might as well go home. And I think many CFOs forget that. It's as critical as ensuring the business the right way. It's as critical as preventing workplace harassment, anything that can blow up the company at the snap of a finger. And accounting is in that group, even more so than FP&A many times. And so I would just encourage all the CFOs out there, words are cheap, and sending something out over Slack or Teams, recognizing the team is always appreciated and it will not go unnoticed. But you need to spend time with your team, understand what they're working on, help them prioritize tasks, help them do the work, and at the end of the day, be invested in their careers and what they want to do, and in their careers and how you can help them get there. I think if you're not spending, depending, let's say you have legal, accounting, and finance reporting to you, a third of your time should be spent with accounting. Perhaps more. Those teams are often bigger. So I would say, show your appreciation by spending time with the team. Be truly invested.
I think that's a great call. And especially in light of the poll that you referenced earlier, if a lot of these CFOs aren't coming from the accounting profession, then they may not know the level of effort it takes to get books accurate and complete. And for CFOs to spend more time to understand and appreciate what that looks like, I think will signal by default that CFOs care about whether you close the books without issues versus just caring when they don't get closed properly. In fact, I would encourage the CFOs that are listening to this podcast, including your fellow colleagues, Dan, like the next time your team files a Q, or I know you guys are public, but I would encourage just saying, hey, you crushed Q1 because you didn't have any material misstatements. I mean, just to make like very positive statements in addition to being more invested in learning what's going on the ground on the accounting side. I mean, I think that will help accountants like me feel like we're being appreciated and being recognized for the hard work that it takes to do everything we're doing. So anyway, I'm going into kind of Oprah Winfrey teary-eyed story now, but I think it's absolutely true in a lot of ways. So you just don't get enough recognition. And actually, Dan, like as we wrap up here, I did have a customer recently ask about OKRs for accounting. And could that be another kind of lever for exact visibility? So if there are OKRs related to accuracy of closing the books and less audit adjustments, have you seen or heard in your circles OKRs along the lines of accuracy for accountants and its effectiveness in promoting engagement?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I've not only heard of it, but we deploy them. We use Lattice as our performance management system, and each one of my teams has key metrics that are linked to our goals. Call them OKRs, call them whatever you want. And you'd expect the simple ones that are, DSO and DPO, the metrics that actually manifest in the business. But we also have month-end close. We also have variance, call them SLAs that we commit to and we grade ourselves against. And you're spot on that codifying those goals into the overall goal framework of the business naturally puts executive eyes on them and not just CFOs eyes on them. And that's really smart. I completely agree with that idea. And to go back to something you said, just to close the loop on it, I made the comment that words are cheap. And what I meant by that is words are cheap relative to your time. But that said, words have real meaning. And I've gotten that feedback from my own teams that they at times will feel like they're toiling in the dark in the business. Many people don't understand the criticality of accounting, for example, or legal, or even some of the elements of finance. And so I agree with what you said, which is recognize the team when they do their jobs well. And I would also say recognize them publicly.
Yes.
I have found that just getting a shout out toward accounting in front of sales and customer success and the ops people, it goes a long way. They feel seen.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're just thanking them within their group and circle, I mean, first of all, that's good. But to do it in a public way across the organization, it's important for us as a company to have accurate books. Thank you, accounting, for helping us achieve that. It's not easy. And that goes a long way. And Dan, I'd love for you to weigh in and maybe share examples, but Gapify, because we're in the accounting space, we naturally have a lot of accountants in the profession who are thinking about leaving the profession. Join us to do something different, because what they see their jobs being is just this repetitive, like I get from one close to the other, to the next, to the next, and the next, without the appreciation, without recognition. It's just like you're going through and repeating the same thing over and over again and not being told you're valued. So I see that as a big reason for why people are fed up with just the monotonous cycle of a close after close. I mean, do you agree with that sentiment or anything to add to that?
I do think there are two things going on there. First of all, I would counter that with most jobs are repetitive and follow a specific cadence. Sales every quarter, every month, they have specific processes they run. It's a highly regimented career. And anybody who sits in accounting who doesn't think that sales or marketing or finance itself don't follow cyclical, repetitive structures, they're just wrong. And so they should be eyes wide open about that. Most jobs have a regimented cadence that they follow. So the grass is not always greener. But then,
can I just quickly add, I would bet Taylor Swift herself even has a regimented schedule and mechanics that has to be followed. So yeah, whether you are in accounting or what is she now, a pop star or a country star, I think there's a level of repetition that jobs and careers have. So that's a really good point and effective for us to recognize. So apologize, I had to throw that in there.
You better be careful. I don't know what her fan group is called, but they may call her mega star or something other than pop star. So you just better be careful, Joe Thumb. You don't want that attention, the wrong kind of it. I 100% agreed to that, which is probably the fifth time I've said that on this podcast, but you and I are almost always aligned when we chat. I think I would also just go back to the comment you and I exchanged earlier around automation. It is just, and you and I both work for software companies that do automation for accountants. So we're heavily invested in this and probably conflicted from some people's point of view. But I think that the only path to making the accounting profession as interesting as it used to be, or as interesting and on parity with other attractive careers to young folks or folks who are coming back from, going back to school, is to change the mix of what we do in accounting day in and day out. And it's got to be the boring, manual, low IQ parts of the job that just involve moving ever expanding data sets around. We have to automate that as much as possible. And that will free us up. And when we do free up that time, and many teams have already done this, just make sure you fill it with interesting work and don't, take on just more and more ever expanding manual tasks if you can help it.
I think our audience would 100% agree with that, Dan. The notion that through automation, we just have to get rid of the manual, boring stuff. We talked about other points today, and I love the creative angle that we applied in this podcast episode. We talked about how CFOs can kind of socialize appreciation. We talked about possibly clarifying the term of like our profession and evolving from just accountant. But ultimately, it's really the boring stuff that drags us down, and I think is causing people to leave the profession. So yeah, it's a great way to wrap up today's session. I mean, I think there's still a lot to talk about related to this subject, but I'm glad we were able to get you on today, Dan, and look forward to having you on the next one.
And I want the audience to know that I floated the idea to Jotham of doing a live podcast, potentially in a coffee or an adult beverage establishment, and I'm putting that on the record.
To completely tie the loop into all the previous points, I think we ought to do a live podcast session at a Taylor Swift concert.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to have to be careful who we tell that to. They're going to want an invite.
That's true. All right, Dan, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.
Such a pleasure, Jotham. Bye now.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.